Today we hear one of the most remarkable stories in the entire New Testament. It is Whitsunday, the day of Pentecost, upon which the Holy Spirit descended upon the whole church. Whitsunday is an old British word for Pentecost, which itself is a contraction of White Sunday, at least according to the scholars at Wikipedia. It refers to the white garments worn by the catechumens who were baptized on Pentecost, which is one of the baptismal feasts. The feast was an important one in ancient Israel as well as Britain. In Jewish tradition, it is known as the Festival of Weeks, 7 weeks after the second day of Passover, and it was when the first fruits of the harvest would be offered to God in the temple. The festival also commemorates Moses receiving the 10 Commandments on Mount Sinai. The Festival of Weeks is one of the 3 pilgrimage feasts: Pesach, or the Feast of Passover, Shavuot, or the Festival of Weeks, and Sukkot, the Festival of Booths. Each of these 3 feasts, Torah requires Jewish people to make a pilgrimage to the temple in Jerusalem, where they would join with the priests there in special rites related to each festival. In the United Kingdom, Whitsunday started the week-long Whitsuntide, a holiday that marked the beginning of summer and a time when the serfs who were working the manor lord's fields would have the week off. A feast was often celebrated with good food and with Morris dancing, where dancers tie bells to their legs and bang sticks together. I'd like to commend the Spiritus Dance Ensemble for breaking with this tradition and choosing not to offer Morris dancing this morning in your offering for the psalm. Regardless, the writer of the story gives us a clear image of what's happening on that day. They were together in one place. The whole group was there. Everyone that was following Jesus, probably 120 strong. The whole church, as it would come to be known, and the Holy Spirit showed up in a big way. A sound like a howling and fierce wind filled the house where they were sitting, and tongues of fire rested upon each of them, on everyone there who was a believer, and they began to proclaim the good news, all in languages that they didn't know. But the truly amazing thing, the miracle of Pentecost, is the fact that everyone who was there, all the people who lived in Jerusalem and were there for the feast, from all parts of the world, each of them heard the good news and understood it in their own language. Chapter 2 of the book of Acts is a nightmare for lectors because they have to rattle off that impossible tongue twister of places: Parthians, Medes, Elamites, and residents of Mesopotamia, and on and on and on. It's a cruel thing to do to lectors. My sincerest thanks to you, Sandy, for your efforts. You deserve hazard pay for today's reading. But the list of places is there for a reason and makes a couple of major theological points. First, the Holy Spirit is for everyone. This wasn't something that happened only to the 11. It's not reserved just for the leaders or for the insiders or for the cool kids. It happened to the whole church. The point of the miracle isn't that the Holy Spirit is a special gift that only some people received, or even worse, that only some people earned, although it sometimes seems that there are those who believe that way. Pentecost was for the whole church, and the Spirit continues to be for the whole church. But even more importantly, the good news is for the whole world. That ridiculous list of complicated names basically represents the extent of the known world at that time by those people. The only reason to name all those places is to point out that for the most part, there was someone there from everywhere, from all the parts of the world, and everyone from everywhere heard the mighty works of God. It was one of the questions that the early church wrestled with. Was this good news for Jews, or was this good news for Gentiles as well? And the Holy Spirit answered that question definitively. Everyone heard the good news that morning. Everyone could see the Holy Spirit in the tongues of fire. Everyone could hear through the Holy Spirit in their own languages, regardless of where they were from. The experience of it all unsettled the people there. They were amazed. Some even tried to explain it all away by grumbling, "Oh, they must be drunk." As if people regularly ended up with flames of fire sprouting from their heads when they've had too much wine. This is probably the most vivid and exciting story in the entire Bible. Thankfully, we have a gospel today that also helps to put the story into context for us as we try to figure out what it means for us today. After all, I've never seen those little flames on anyone's head before, which is a drag because it would really help us out and sort out which people we should take seriously and which people to ignore when they start talking about God. If the preacher says something daft from the pulpit, people just have to look above his head for that little flame. I think the preacher might be full of it today. If it's there, well, there you go. I'm the Holy Spirit, and I approve this message. Some guy with a bullhorn on a street corner telling us all that we're going to hell unless we believe exactly the same way that he does? Well, no tongue of fire, no dice, bro. Sadly, we don't have that. Instead, we have a promise from Jesus. The Spirit will abide you and teach you and guide you. And whatever you ask in my name, I will give it. And thank God. We know that when we bless water, as will happen around the world today, and will happen at that very font later tonight here in our own church, when we baptize someone in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, like we will do today, and like people are happening to people around the world, we know it's the real thing. We know that when we say you are sealed in Christ's Spirit, sealed by the Holy Spirit and marked as Christ's own forever, Jesus makes it true for all time, every time. We may not have tongues of fire, but we do have the Holy Spirit who abides in each of us, who supports and guides our community faith, who will be with us for all time. That's the miracle of Pentecost. That the Holy Spirit arrives and that we have that Spirit with us for all time. God at work in the church, even now. And thank God we have the Holy Spirit. Humans have needed the Spirit throughout history to lead and to guide the church. The Holy Spirit led the Philadelphia 11 and their supporters, the first women who were ordained priests in the Episcopal Church, to be ordained at the Church of the Advocate in Philadelphia on July 29th, 1974, 2 years before the General Convention got around to authorizing women to be ordained. Without the Holy Spirit and the Spirit's movement in the lives of those women and of the bishops who ordained them, who knows when women's ordination would have come. The Holy Spirit moved through the church when Gene Robinson was elected Bishop of New Hampshire. And the Episcopal Church consented to his election in 2003, allowing that diocese to choose their own bishop, even though he was gay and partnered. It was a struggle for many in the church and for many in the Anglican Communion. But it was also a faithful response to the Holy Spirit, whom we believe moves in the church whenever we elect people to leadership. And the Holy Spirit is alive in our midst now as well, as we prepare for the daunting task of raising a significant amount of money to replace the roof on this building, to make this building ready for the big earthquake that we all know is coming, even though we don't know when, and which our building is not yet ready for. This building hasn't been watertight since the day it was put up. And we've lived with it for decades. But now is the time that we have to replace the roof. And we can be confident that the Holy Spirit is with us, even in this, even when the task is so large and the future seems so uncertain. Just as the church has since that first Pentecost, we experience the Holy Spirit in and among us. And we trust that the Holy Spirit is with us in this task too. We may not be able to see how just yet, but we know that the Spirit will show us what is next for our community of faith. And we can be confident that when the time comes, the Spirit will be with us, urging us forward toward a bright and hope-filled future in a watertight sanctuary. The tongues of fire that we read about today are impressive. Speaking in languages all around the world is mind-boggling. But the miracle of Pentecost isn't in the speaking, it's in the understanding and in trusting that the ongoing support of the Holy Spirit is with us on that day, on this day, and for every day, forever. Amen.